So what happens when you take the general feeling of Final Fantasy, mix in some extra waifus, season liberally with some impressive maps, and sprinkle with delightful characters? Radiant Arc. You get Radiant Arc. The game follows the main character, Linky, as he explores out into the world to fulfill his destiny as the Radiant Arc, a being of light destined to save the world from the approaching darkness, much like the original Radiant Arc did 1,000 years prior. At its core, the game is a lovingly pieced together tribute to classic JRPGs, but most specifically Final Fantasy IV. While this is a wonderful backbone for the game to have, at times I felt it may have been borrowing a little too much from the source material. Still, stellar writing really carried the game, and the combat was wonderfully handled. Complex without being overbearing, but also simplistic without feeling tired and overdone. About the combat, one thing I thoroughly enjoyed was how it allowed the player to pretty much play how they wanted. Several characters have multiple specs where you gear towards, and you could, for example, have a dodge evade tank if you really wanted, instead of a regular one, the sword and board type. Or you could turn Linky from melee damage to magic. It just goes on and on. It really came down to skills used, and mostly gear. Oh, good lord, the gear. To say there were hundreds of unique items isn't an understatement. There is a ton of gear to find in optional dungeons that will be far better than anything else you can buy, and makes exploring these side areas worthwhile. I also highly recommend exploring them because it helps to level without making the player feel like they're grinding, even though technically that is exactly what's happening. It wasn't all roses and sunshine, however. I personally felt there were simply too many playable characters, with the last two being added in the story's third act. By that time, I was getting used to the way I wanted to play, and felt they were simply underutilized. And overall, some characters felt very important to the story, and others felt simply tacked on. And it can happen with a large cast, and this game is no exception, sadly. The game has an impressively crafted world and story. I liked a lot of the way that the story flowed and a lot of the interesting twists and turns, even though they were a little predictable. The combat is really interesting and very adjustable. I really liked how you could basically pick how you wanted a character to play. Not all characters are like that, but enough. I love the character designs. Whoever came up with how they were supposed to look did an excellent job. And another little neat thing is there are a ton of community cameos. Chances are you might recognize a few of the people if you've been keeping up with me and watching my streams. The game boasts an impressive cast of characters, but I feel like there may be too many. Not all are really utilized or feel utilized, if you get what I'm saying. And while it is very well written, the story is pretty predictable. Some of the encounters rely on RNG a little bit too much, or more finding that perfect combat rotation, and then you're kind of stuck in doing that because, hey, it works. It's got a lot of really good comedy and a few little, let's say, blue moments. Nothing really more than PG-13, but I felt that maybe they were a little out of place in a game like this. Even though there are a ton of characters to pick from, it's very easy to fall into a, hey, this is my party and I'm gonna combat how I want to. And you don't really get the opportunity to explore other characters, especially if you've been playing with certain ones for most of the game and you're just very comfortable with them. While I realize this is, kind of a game made in respect to old JRPGs, especially Final Fantasy IV, I feel sometimes it borrows a little bit too much from that source material. And towards the end of the game, it kind of felt like it was sort of rushed. The pacing of the game was pretty moderate until you get towards maybe the last quarter of it, then just like boom, 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 and then we're done. All things said and considered, is Radiant Arc a blazingly brilliant title, or does it sort of fizzle and pulse like a dying LED? While there are some issues with a bit of the combat RNG and the pacing towards the end of the game, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. From the characters, at least those that were more fleshed out, to the world itself and the unique gear, a lot of care was given to this and it shows. I 100% recommend this and think anyone who even slightly enjoyed RPGs of old will find this both comfortable and new. And there are a lot of waifus, if that's your thing. I'm HawkZombie. Thanks for listening.